Hey folks, so you got your hybrid steppers in, you're ready to install them. There's a few things you need to do to be prepared for that. The first is getting your table where you can get to the axis and everything. If you've got an enclosure, it's a little more difficult. If you can take that off or take pieces off to gain access, you'll know where you need to get to when you need to get there. One key thing to remember is you've got to have the door open. So go ahead and do that, and then jog your axis to where you need them. And I thought I was prepped for that, but I'm not. So we're going to go ahead and jog some axis now. Your door will open if there's nothing on the table, but if you want to leave your work holding on the table, it might interfere. So just make sure you get that electrical cabinet door open before you put your table in the way. Because I know my table gets in the way with my work holding on here. You will need a block of wood for the Z-axis, and remember to put this on the spindle itself, not on the rotating part. The rotating part's your bearings. You don't want to put weight on that. And you just want it to support the weight. No need to try to squish it down on there or anything. Once we pop loose the Z-axis, all that weight's going to be free to spin the screw and roll on down. So make sure you get that spindle column supported. And once you do this, everything's kind of tied together. So make sure you have your X and Y where you want them, where you can get access to everything. As far as other tools you're going to need a Phillips driver with a decent amount of reach to be able to get your drives off. And there's a connector on the bottom that you're going to have to get off. You're going to need a small flathead, and I mean small, to make a couple of electrical connections. That's documented in paperwork on which wire goes to which connector on which drive. Unfortunately, I couldn't send those ready to plug in because the connectors and the holes are too small. They wouldn't go through. So I pre-wired as much as possible, and I labeled everything as best as possible. And if you have any problems, feel free to contact me. You've got my contact information if you've got one of these kits. So other than that, you want a good assortment of Allen keys, hex wrenches, because that's what's holding most of the hardware on. And with that said, let's dive in. With the machine off, right down here on the bottom of these two connectors back there are two screw-in connectors for your X and your Y. Sorry. That's what they look like. You need to unscrew those and pull the wiring around. And it is a lot simpler if you do it from the back side, but my enclosure is in the way and I'm not disassembling that right now. But it is reachable right under here. And once that's done, now we will remove this splash guard and this tray to gain access to the X-axis. And while we're in here working, we will remove the Phillips head screws from that cover right there, and then come around to the back side. If you have an enclosure, if you don't have the enclosure, you can get to it through here, and then we will remove those two screws. 5/32 hex key. We'll break these loose for you. And you only have to loosen them up as this is slotted, so. Once you have those backed off, this just slides right off. Like I said, they're slotted, so you don't have to take those bolts all the way out. Our next move is to break those loose right there. It's going to be the same 30 seconds. Now with that out of the way, grab your Phillips screwdriver. We're just going to pull this cover right here off. And they're fairly short screws, so be careful, keep up with them. And I suggest just doing one axis at a time to make life easier. Now that we have that loose, what we're going to do is jog the machine till we can get access to these cap head screws. And if you already have your Z supported, remember to raise that up first. And now we'll simply watch this as we jog it. Until those Allen head bolts are facing us. And then we simply pop loose the ball screw side because that whole thing's coming off. And now using the 30 seconds again, we'll remove the screws holding the stepper motors on. And installation is just the reverse of disassembly. Be sure to run your cables to where they can go around the backside following the same path as the originals did. In theory, you could run it straight under the mill if you wanted, but you risk squishing stuff and whatnot. I don't recommend that. Let it follow the oil line and go around the backside of the machine. Okay, and for the Y-axis, it's the same process. Remove this cover, loosen the coupling on the ball screw side, and remove the 4 bolts to remove the motor. And once that's done, installation is in the reverse. Now that our axis, our X and Y axis have been removed, we're going to remove the inputs into the electrical controller. Make sure the machine is in an off state. You don't want any lights up here. You need to go ahead and turn off the power to the machine on the side. Just shut it down because there's a lot of juice in here and it will get you if it gets the chance. For the Z axis, we remove these 4 Phillips head screws. Set this off to the side. Go ahead and loosen up this coupler here so you can remove the electrical side of it. Rotate the axis to line up the coupler. Make sure you got a block under there to catch the head because it's going to want to spin. And loosen the set screws on the, not the set screws, loosen the cap head bolts in the coupler. on the ball screw side. Then we can remove these 4 mounting screws and pull the whole motor off. You're going to have to set it aside until we pull the electrical out.